Hey everybody, it's Mike and welcome to Chip Damage, and it's over. E3 2021 has finished earlier this week and it's all kind of sunk in. Everything's kind of settled, the dust has cleared, and we now have a clear image of what this E3 was. I've already made videos going over my thoughts and impressions on the Square Enix press conference as well as the Nintendo E3 Direct, and today we're going to go over the remainder of what I was interested in. The Microsoft press conference, the Capcom press conference, as well as my final kind of judgment and thoughts and impression on this very weird E3, this kind of recovery year E3. And you know, it was wild. A lot of hopes were dashed, a few dreams came true, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And like I said, if you haven't seen my videos covering my impressions and thoughts on the Square Enix press conference as well as the Nintendo Direct, please check that out, as well as my video that on my hopes and dreams of this for this E3, because looking back on it ended up being pretty funny, pretty inaccurate. That's how it usually goes. But without any further ado, let's jump into the remaining two press conferences that I really had my attention focused on while going into this. We'll start with Capcom. Now, if you've seen any of my prior videos, my collection videos, you guys will know I'm a huge Capcom fan. It's probably my favorite game developer in the industry, and this E3 was just bizarre. Why? Why did Capcom feel the need to have an E3 press conference this year? This isn't something they typically do, but they announced that, yes, we are going to have a presence at E3, we're going to have a presentation, and they kind of beforehand set expectations straight, like, hey, we're going to be talking about these certain titles. But as I've mentioned before, when a company does that, no one believes you. E3 is the big boy. When you say, hey, I'm showing up to E3, people automatically assume you're going to try to wow them. I mean, that's the press conference that everyone has their eyes on. Like, yeah, everyone checks out like Nintendo Directs and Sony States of Play and, you know, things like the Sonic Anniversary kind of presentation. But E3 is the one that has the most general eyes on it. So when you're like saying, hey, we got something to show, people expect you to bring it. So you could set expectations all you want. If you say, hey, I'm only showing these, people are going to be waiting until you say, hey, one more thing, and you end the show with some blockbuster. You know, and that's kind of unfortunate for people who are honest. If Capcom was honest, they said, hey, we're only going over Monster Hunter and Phoenix Wright and some Resident Evil stuff. And that's what they did. But honestly, even with that information going into it, this was the most disappointing press conference. Square Enix had a pretty bad show, obviously, with the announcement of the Final Fantasy Collection only coming to mobile and Steam, where they kind of already are, and the bizarreness of Final Fantasy Origin. But that bizarreness made it stick out. Like, how weird that press conference felt kind of made it memorable in a way. Like, it was bad, but Capcom wasn't just bad, it was boring. It felt like a waste of time. And yes, like, other press conferences have felt like waste of time, but like, Capcom is a company you wouldn't expect. Like, oh, almost anything they show will be great. And this may have been the worst show from my favorite company. Like, let's go over what they actually said. They said, hey, Resident Evil 8 did well, and because of that, there's going to be DLC. What? Like, of course it did well. It's Resident Evil. Like, regardless of the quality of the game, you're going to have a strong initial push for any numbered Resident Evil. Like, Resident Evil 6 had incredible sales. So we knew it was going to sell well, and we kind of all expected there to be DLC. So it was no shocker when they announced that. Like, Resident Evil 7 had tons of DLC. Resident Evil 2 had some DLC. Sadly, Resident Evil 3 had no DLC. I'm still kind of salty on that. They kind of focused on that terrible, like, Resistance multiplayer thing that no one played. And they kind of followed up with that in both ways. Like, yeah, there's going to be some DLC for 8, but, you know, here's our weird multiplayer Resident Evil focused separate game that no one cares about. Like, I don't know why they keep trying the multiplayer Resident Evil thing. Like, there may be something there, but they're just not getting close. There was Operation Raccoon City and Umbrella Chronicles, Resistance, and Reverse. Like, no one cares about updates to Reverse, and that's kind of what they focused on for a few minutes in this presentation. And like, that's just sad. I mean, I would have been happy with a trailer for the DLC. Like, hey, what was Chris Redfield doing during the events of Village? Or like, this is where Ada Wong or Jill or Leon were. Like, no, they should, hey, wait a little bit longer, it's coming. Why waste our time with that? Like, why even talk about it if you have nothing to say? Like, if you wanted to do a quick, hey, thank you for buying the game, it turned out well, that would have been fine, but they went on and just wasted part of this very short press conference. And then they went on to talk about Monster Hunter, the new Monster Hunter. Now, let me be clear. I fully respect Monster Hunter, and it is Capcom's largest selling franchise, largest selling single game with Monster Hunter World. And, there's been a multitude of really great Monster Hunter games in the last couple years, but they're not for me. I've tried to get in the Monster Hunter series multiple times, and it is mechanically sound, but that's just not enough. The reason why I think older Capcom IPs are so endearing and so enduring is because of the characters. People love Dante. People love Mega Man and Beautiful Joe, and the multitude of games like God Hand, like Gene, and that's why I'm attracted to them. People love the Street Fighter characters, like their caricatures. Like it has not only are they all mechanically sound and innovating and really fun games, but it has literal characters in it that you can get attached to, histories and stories and personalities. And Monster Hunter is more of just like, I don't know, mechanics. Like people like Monster Hunter for the mechanics. I guess like the monsters are characters like Gore Magala and all that, but that's not what I go in for games. I want to play as a character I like. I want to play as a character in a single player adventure that I can go through multiple times and multiple difficulties and really enjoy. And that's kind of what Capcom is to me. Like, Mega Man, I'm attached to it. I want to go through it, then I want to go through it again and find all the secrets and so on and so forth. And that's not what Monster Hunter is. Monster Hunter is somewhere between like a Dark Souls and an MMO, at least Monster Hunter World. And of course, Monster Hunter stories and the sub-series like that kind of focus more on a single-player adventure, but the world just isn't interesting to me. It's not weird enough, basically. I like my games very weird, very Eastern-focused, and I think there's a lot of OG Capcom fans are in the same boat. Like, yeah, I like Monster Hunter, but Capcom may be focusing on Monster Hunter and Resident Evil a little bit too much. We want to see a new IP or a revival of an old one, and that's just not there. So no shade on Monster Hunter fans, but like you guys are getting it all. You guys are getting a little bit too much, and it's kind of pushing the non-Monster Hunter Capcom fans to the side. Because keep in mind, there are a sect of people who play Monster Hunter who have no interest in Capcom's other IPs. The sales numbers just kind of show it. Like there are more Monster Hunter players than any other players of any of other Capcom's IPs. So not everyone who got into Monster Hunter is playing Street Fighter, and I just feel like those old franchises, I don't want to see them neglected in light of Monster Hunter's success. I was really hoping for a new Mega Man collection. I think all the collections they've been releasing lately have been fantastic, and there's still some that need collections. Battle Network, Star Force, and Legends in particular. We got none of that. Hell, I want an OG Resident Evil collection, kind of like the tank controls like 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica in some collection. But no, we just got Monster Hunter for a good majority of this press conference, and that was just kind of sad. And then we got great Ace Attorney, the Phoenix Wright spinoff finally coming to the West. And that's cool. Yet again, Phoenix Wright isn't my type of thing. Like, yeah, that game's got character, but it's not like a gamey game. It's not something like where have combat or enemies. Like, it's very outlandish, and I enjoy that. But that's not for me, so I wasn't super excited. Good on you for the Phoenix Wright fans. However, that was far too long. I don't care what anyone says. Like, those games are very simple. That presentation showed gameplay for a number of minutes on that game. And it's like there's not much gameplay. Like, what you're doing in those games. Like, if you're a fan, why show it for so long? So they just wasted more time, and that just that made me sad. And then they moved on to esports to round the show out. Why? No one watching E3 wants to know the state of Street Fighter esports. That's shown in their little Street Fighter press conferences, their little Street Fighter presentations. That's cool to see some pros come in and talk about the game and where it's going. But not at E3. That's a waste of time. You have eyes on you. Why talk about esports, which is kind of an insular community among Street Fighter players at E3, the big show that's supposed to be for everyone. And when it ended, when that hostess, she just kind of said oh, thanks, and we'll talk to you later. I couldn't believe it. I felt like it wasn't a presentation. I felt like I watched an ad before the presentation. That was pre-E3 show stuff, and it boggled my mind and made me really sad. I had a number of predictions. What did I want to see for that? I wanted to see some, like I said, more Mega Man, more collections, hopefully maybe Pragmata, their new IP. No, none of that. The Street Fighter DLC character, the 5th one, nope. Oro's release date, nope, we didn't get anything like that. Any other game collections, that was so disappointing and so unmemorable. I'm actually having trouble remembering anything from it. It might have been worse than Square's press conference, because I remember some games for that. I remember Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't care about it, but I remember it. So yeah, Capcom, I love you. You're doing great. But if you don't have anything to show, don't get people's hopes up. I don't care if you prep and say, hey, this is what we're going to show. At E3, that's not good enough. We always expect more. That's the one people have their eyes on. But moving on to an earlier press conference that wasn't bad. I got to say, at first I wasn't excited, but really, after rewatching it and kind of thinking about it, was pretty decent, was the Xbox/Bethesda conference. Now, I don't think it rocked my socks. It didn't blow me out of the water, but it was solid. They had a lot of games to show. I mean, it felt like kind of a long advertisement for Game Pass, which I'm not super excited on. I like owning my games. Game Pass is a service where the games are kind of gone if you end the service. But if people want to save money, which is always a good thing, Game Pass is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of awesome that all their IPs, their acquired IPs, their own IPs, are like free on Game Pass day one, and the selection on there is already excellent for both Xbox and PC. But what was I there for? I was there for, new exclusive IPs, and we got one or two. But my predictions were, seeing some Halo, which we got, but there was no mention of Perfect Dark, Fable 3. I mean, they said they're working on a new Fable. Hellblade 2, gone. Psychonauts 2, we did see some of. That was cool. And a new Bethesda IP, or Starfield, and we did get some Starfield, but no miracle comebacks. There was no new Perfect Dark or Ninja Gaiden or anything like that. Sadly, nothing from Rare, nothing really that, of note. But what we did get wasn't bad. We found out that Starfield, which I predict is just going to be Fallout/Elder Scrolls in Space, will be an Xbox console exclusive coming out late next year. Cool. We didn't see much gameplay, but if it's, going to be Bethesda's new big IP, you can kind of guess what kind of game it's going to be. It's, they haven't covered space yet. They did fantasy and they did post-apocalyptic fiction. So, Fallout in Space, I'm willing to give it a shot. And it's going to be exclusive to the next Xbox Series. I do not believe that will be on the Xbox One, so maybe it'll push the hardware a little bit. That's cool. It's too far out to get too excited, but it's a big get. Any Bethesda exclusive any Bethesda game period is going to sell. It's so odd that, Bethesda's kind of fallen from grace over the last couple of years. It's not as trusted as a company, but you can expect them to sell. And speaking of which, they wasted some time in the beginning with the Bethesda stuff. You had Todd Howard out there, and, I wouldn't open the show with him, but they talked about Fallout 76 for a bit. Why? I don't care if that game is recovering, and good on you for anyone who's enjoying Fallout 76. This isn't an attack on you, but the general light, the public perception of that game cannot be fixed. They wasted time on that, and I would not have advised that. And then they moved on, and then they just showed game after game after game, and some of them were pretty damn cool. I have to say I'm super excited for Party Animals, that little fun 8-player beanbag fighting game. If any of you out there are Gang Beast fans, this game is for you. This looked like the straight sequel to Gang Beast. That is one of my favorite games to play with a group of friends, especially if they are slightly intoxicated. Party Animals was a little game that I'm very excited for. Then they showed a lot of CG trailers for games that kind of look similar. Some people I saw were excited for these, but a lot of these games are just gritty first-person shooters set in a world with a Fortnite aesthetic. Let's jump to the end. They showed that game Redfall, a CG trailer for the game Redfall by Arcane Studios, and Arcane is great, but it was a very long CG trailer with where you kind of get the idea it's going to be a team-based shooter against monsters, which is also exactly what the game Contraband, which was another CG trailer that they showed, where you get the idea that it's an open world co-op game where you fight monsters, and also Dying Light 2 and Stalker 2. Those can all be individually good, but in my head, it's all team of quirky heroes fights band of monsters, whether that be zombie or vampire or mutant. And it's okay, we get it. They really post-apocalyptic team-based shooters, but why? Unfortunately, in my head, they're all kind of blending together. I'm a little bit more interested in Back 4 Blood because it's Left 4 Dead, but there's so many of those games, and they were kind of spread out through the press conference, and they all kind of globbed together in my head, and I certainly would not have ended my show on a CG trailer that was kind of long for an IP that we don't know when it's coming out exactly, just bizarre. So all those games just didn't grab me too much, but hey, if that's your thing, you're getting plenty of it. If you want to co-op quirky hero versus monster shooter, you're going to have your pick of the litter with that. But then earlier in the show, something I wasn't too hot on was Pirates of the Caribbean expansion for Sea of Thieves. Now, I've heard that Sea of Thieves has picked up some steam, that it's not a bad game, but who cares about Pirates of the Caribbean anymore? People in 2003. Like, this is so odd. It's like a game that's past its prime, missed the mark, for a franchise that is really past its prime and has missed the mark on multiple times. It feels like two C students getting together to like do a project so that they may get a B minus, but like I can't find anybody who's super excited to have Jack Sparrow with them in Sea of Thieves. So I guess Rare is doing something. They're wasting their time with that, but whatever. Moving on. Psychonauts 2, gonna be solid. Saw it. We already know what that game's gonna be. I'm excited for it to come out, and it's definitely more associated with the Xbox brand than anybody else. So yeah, good on you for Psychonauts 2. Atomic Heart, one first-person shooter that I actually am thinking looks kind of cool. Atomic Heart was the shooter that has kind of a Russian, Eastern European, almost BioShock feel with some body horror, some mechanical, like a different vibe than Otherworld. Somewhere between like Fallout and BioShock with a European twist. Not looking too bad. Atomic Heart, I have my eye on you. You look creepy and weird, and I love creepy and weird. You know, they showed that Suikoden or Suikoden, however you say it, kind of inspired game, that spiritual sequel that Euden Chronicle. I know I'm not saying that right. That looks cool. Not coming out for a year, and then the spin-off off of that isn't coming out for another year. But it was cool to see that get some press conference coverage because that game looks awesome. Suikoden is a great series, and I'm glad it's getting some love in its spiritual sequel. Outer Worlds 2, an exclusive. Now, I myself haven't played Outer Worlds 1, but I've heard it's solid, and it sold over 3 million copies last time I checked. And that's a good number. That's a pretty good hit, especially from Obsidian Studios, who made the fantastic Fallout New Vegas, as well as a number of other good RPGs throughout the years. Like, I'm excited to see what that game will be, and I'm glad that Xbox has a new IP all their own, a console exclusive. And I gotta say, two games that impressed me for different reasons, games I wouldn't normally be interested in, were the Microsoft Flight Simulator. That game is just a visual like showcase. Of course, those games always are, but it's going to be on consoles, and I have my eye on it a little bit. That Top Gun expansion is so corny and stupid that I love it. That's what I need. Like, it's weird. Like, yeah, you just want to be like Maverick's jet in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Maybe, you know, that's something I'll try out if it's on, you know, if I have Game Pass at the time. I'm not going to buy that game for $60, but I will try it on Game Pass. And yeah, for someone who does not like realistic racers or hasn't been into racing games in a while, like non-kart racers, Forza, the new Forza looked incredible. I gotta say, that is one hell of a good looking game, and it looks like it has like some wacky arcadey modes. I am definitely gonna be checking out Forza. Since I have an Xbox, it is an option to me, and I've never played a Forza game, and I haven't played a racing game like that in quite a few years. That one got my attention. Not only its beauty, but how like wacky it kind of looks like it can get with some arcadey features. Forza, I'm gonna check you out. You got me. I was surprised. Overall, all those games were kind of spread out and, you know, aimed at everybody. It was a broad shotgun approach that Microsoft aimed. Some were cool, some weren't, but like there was kind of something for everyone. I mean, even with like Chronicles, like there was some JRPG love there. You usually don't get that at a Microsoft press conference. But of course, the elephant in the room is Halo Infinite, which of course everyone knew was going to be shown at this E3. Number one, I want to talk about how weird the placement was. Like, Halo was in the middle of the show. I don't know what that says. I mean, I think that Halo is still Microsoft's biggest IP. I mean, other than like Minecraft, but you know, like that like weirdly doesn't get brought into the conversation. But like the brand identity is still tied to Halo. So I don't think the middle of the show is where you show that. And given that they didn't show that much, I think you still open or close the show with Halo. I think that would have been a better mood setter than opening with Bethesda or closing with Back 4 Blood. I'm sorry, closing with Redfall. Like I said, they all kind of mashed together. But what I saw was decent. The single player kind of reveal of like not Cortana in this story, that was nothing. I wasn't too happy with that. Like Master Chief floating through space visually looked great and it set like kind of a vibe, but I didn't really get much out of that. I kind of wanted to see some campaign gameplay, see some improvement from what we saw before, some new setting. Like I wasn't dragged into whatever they were kind of setting up for with like fake Cortana. You know, I'm in for that campaign. I am a fan of the Halo campaigns. That is the main reason I'm buying that game. And, you know, I love the multiplayer, but I want Halo to have a good story and a good campaign. And that didn't hook me as much. I'm still getting the game, but I'd still like to see a little bit more. The multiplayer, on the other hand, I think looked great. I think they really showed how kind of frenetic and different that campaign is. Like, yeah, you know, grappling hooks and sprint that's more of a Call of Duty type thing where it's a little gimmicky. I am someone who doesn't think Halo needs like a sprint or that kind of pace. But this multiplayer showed what Halo is still all about. It's about vehicles and chaos and wacky guns like bouncing energy rays and like a spike gun hitting, a warthog, and warthogs can carry heavy weapons like hammers and gun turrets, and grappling hooks hooking onto vehicles and other items. Like that looked cool and fun, and I'm definitely going to check that out. The gameplay of Halo has never really been the issue, like kind of with 5 it was, but it looks like they're getting away from that. I'm excited for the multiplayer, but man, do I want this kind of new trilogy that 4 started to end on a high note. So yeah, overall, I'm walking away more positive than negative than that, but it was just the placement. Like, that was in the middle. That was weird. I'm not a big fan of that. So overall, I give the Xbox, like, I guess a B. Like, I didn't really... Capcom got an F. That was, like... It was almost like an NA, like, didn't show up to class. But Microsoft, I'd give, like, a B minus, C plus. Like, a lot of games, some new exclusives. Nothing really, like, whoa, wowed me. But there was a few things that are like, hey, I'll try that. And I guess that's good enough because... years prior, Microsoft really hasn't done that. And they showed some exclusives that people will be genuinely interested in. Starfield and Outer Worlds. Like, they didn't focus on, I mean, they did focus on some Halo and Forza, but it wasn't just Halo, Forza, Gears. Like, they had some other interesting big and small IPs. So, good on you, Microsoft. I'm glad to see that you're starting this kind of generation on the right foot with a lot of variety. That's what you need. You need some variety, but chill on the quirky team-based shooters set in open worlds against monsters. Kind of sick of that. But yeah, that kind of wraps up. There were other press conferences throughout, like Ubisoft, Gearbox, and I guess Namco Bandai, but they didn't really grab me. Everyone kind of knows that those weren't fantastic. But these were the ones I had my eye on that I have predictions for that I was hoping did the best. And overall, I guess it was okay. I think out of the 4 that I was really interested in, Nintendo did the best by a country mile. And then Microsoft was right behind it, doing decent. And then I guess Square got a D minus or F plus, and then Capcom was kind of like that NA, didn't even show up. So that's how I kind of rank them of the 4 I was interested in. Overall, this E3 was weird and disappointing, but I think we all kind of knew that going into it just because, hey, we just got past 2020 and 2021 is just continued the trend of being a bizarre and hard, weird year to work through. I don't blame developers if things are going slowly. The state of the world that it was in, I'm glad they have anything to show at all, so I'm very grateful and appreciative of that. But this overall E3 was not like the savior of the year, the return to form for gaming that many expected it to be. Like, it's not like we got a blowout, an awesome trailer for Halo, like, whoa, now everyone's got to get it, or like a new 3D Mario or something like that. I mean, I guess the footage of Breath of the Wild 2 is the biggest thing for most people, or Metroid Dread, which was a fantastic announcement. But overall, I kind of walk away from this E3 like, yeah, it was okay. And there have been E3s like that in years before, in years prior. I think there have been worse E3s for sure. But I think after this long, tough year and a half that we've all gone through, we were kind of expecting deep in our hearts to be wowed, kind of be uplifted. And I think many of us were not, but that's an unrealistic expectation. So I'm glad E3 still exists. I will definitely be checking out next year. And I want to thank all the presenters for, just having something to show, except for Capcom. Don't do that again. But yeah, gaming in the 9th gen, I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to get my hands on some of the newer games for all the consoles. And overall, I guess I have to say that, hey, E3 gave me some games to look forward to, both old IPs and new ones. And I guess I can't ask for more than that. But what do you guys think? What were your highs and lows of this E3? If you haven't seen the Capcom or the Square Enix or the Nintendo video, please check those out and comment there what you wanted from those companies. But overall, for Capcom, Microsoft, and E3 as a whole, what did you guys think? What did you want to see? How would you grade it? Give me a 1 to 10 or an A through F. Like, how was E3 2021 for you as a gamer? What consoles were you looking forward to the most, the announcements? What PC games did you like the most? I want to know. I love the discussions. Thank you so much for commenting below, because I've had some really cool kind of insights into what people were thinking about these press conferences. And thank you so much to hearing me rant and ramble about it for a while. I really appreciate that, because, hey, I'm just a guy who loves games and has thoughts on them, and I want to share them with people who also love games and share their thoughts on them. So, with that said, if you've liked what you've seen, please consider liking and subscribing. Check out what I have coming out in the future. If you haven't seen my other videos kind of going over unboxings, game reviews, and collectibles, please check those out. My name is Mike. This has been Chip Damage, and please take care of yourselves. Thank you so much.